Now let's create ourselves some pillars that we can actually set on fire with this lighter. So again, right click in the content browser, blueprint class, just a regular actor, and let's call this pillar actor. Let's open this up and let me give this some shapes. So again, a static mesh. We have a pillar by default available to us, but this is a really big one. So I'm gonna make this a bit smaller, like this. Obviously, you can use any mesh you like. And also, let me add a particle system to this so we can actually see when we set this on fire. And I'm going to use the default fire, and I'm going to move this up a bit. There we go. But, well, by default, I want to disable this. So I'm going to scroll down till I see the auto active. So Activision auto active. I'm going to set this to false. So by default, this is going to be disabled. Now, in order for us to interact with this, I'm going to do something basically the same thing as we did with the lighter. I'm going to add a sphere collision to this. And let's unparent this and let's make this bigger. So just like over there, I'm going to set like 150 will be a good value for this. And I'm going to again create the begin overlap and end overlap events on this. To make life easier, I'm just going to go back to the lighter and copy these nodes right here and paste the same nodes inside of our pillar and reconnect pins the same way. So the executions and the other actor references and everything else can stay the same. We are storing the interactable as being the self, so as in this specific pillar. Now we got to add the interaction interface so that we can interact. So let's go to class settings and again let's add our interaction interface. There we go. Once we have done that, we can then run our event start interaction. There we go. Now the thing is that we now need to check whether we have that lighter inside of our character, and only if we have the lighter then we can actually do something with this interaction. So I'm going to go back to my top-down character real quick and I'm going to create a new function called find item. Now inside of this function I'm going to drag in my inventory. I'm going to do a loop for each with a break and connect the execution. Over here what I want to do is break the array element to get its name, and I want to check whether the name is equal to a specific value. The value is going to be provided on the input, so I'm just going to drag this value inside of the input node, and now we have the input, and I'm going to call this item name. Now in the loop's body we can then do an if depending on this condition so that we know whether we have that specific item inside of our inventory. Then I'm going to add a local variable and I'm going to call this local found and make this into a boolean value, which then on if this if branch is true we can set to be true. And then once we have set this to be true we can then break our loop so that we don't waste our time and output the information that we have the item. So then on completion we can then return, add a return node, and we need to provide then an output which is then going to, I'm just going to call this success, which can be a boolean value, and we can then plug in our local found inside of this. And then whenever we find the item that we were looking for, this is going to return true. If it's not going to find the item, well, then it's going to return us false. So that means that now we can go back to our pillar actor, and on the start interaction as the player, we can try to find the item. So let's run the call function find item, and let's provide the item name, which in our case is the lighter. And then from this one, we can do an if to see if we actually found the item, and if the item is available, then let's drag in our particle system and let's set active. Set active, and then on true we can set the new active to be true. So let's give this a test. Let's add a bunch of these pillars. I'm going to remove these things right here, move the floor a bit to reset the lighting. Here we go, and add a couple of these pillars. So now let's give this a go, press play, let's pick up a lighter, walk up here. There we go. We have set 1 on fire, 2 on fire, 3 on fire, 4 on fire. And if we don't have a lighter, well, it does not get set on fire. Now the next task would be to give this some kind of a delay so that we would have a specific time frame in which we need to actually set all of these on fire. So what I'm gonna do is go to the pillar actor now, and I'm going to add a new variable and call this puzzle finished. So that whenever we finish the puzzle, so that these pillars would still stay on fire, so it doesn't extinguish them. So after the set active has been set to true, I'm going to do a delay, and the delay is going to be, let's say, like 20 seconds. Then after those 20 seconds, I'm going to do an if branch check to see if the puzzle is finished. Now, if it's not finished, if it returns false, then I'm going to copy this particle set active node over here, connect this to false, and set the new active to be false so that this would disable our particle system. So now at this point we should create a function which is actually going to check whether the other pillars are active or not. So for that, let's create a new function and let's call this check other pillars. Now to make this work, we're going to need to also create a new variable which is going to hold these other pillars. So I'm going to call this pillars, and we're going to make this into a pillar actor type, and let's make this into an array, and also let's make sure that we make this instance editable and exposed on spawn so that we can actually provide this information from the outside when this actor is already in the game world. Now I'm going to bring in the pillars array, and I'm going to loop through all of them. So we're going to loop through all of them with a break. Then we're going to connect the execution, and I'm going to check whether the particle system is active. So from the array element, we're going to get the particle system, the one that we have for our fire, and from this particle system, we're going to check whether this is active. So type back active, and it's going to tell you is active. Now from here, we can do an if branch check. There we go, depending on this condition, whether it is active or not. And for this now, we also need a local variable, which is going to inform us about what is the actual status of all the pillars. So I'm going to create a new local variable, and I'm going to call this local fail, because we are only going to make this true if one of the pillars is not active. So I'm going to make this into a boolean and a single value. And then if this will return as false, so if the pillar is not active, the particle system is not active, then we are going to set our local fail to be true, and then we can go directly to the break to stop the loop. Then after the loop has been completed, so from the loop's completion, then we can do an if branch check, and for the condition now we can use our local fail. So let's drag that in. Now, if this is false, then that means that, well, all the pillars are active, and well, then that means we no longer actually need to be able to activate or deactivate them. So we need to pause our delay, so basically stop it. We don't really even need to stop it, because if the puzzle is finished, then it's going to come through the true route, and it's not going to set them back to false. So in our check other pillars, I'm going to do another loop through the pillars, but instead I'm not going to have a break. I'm just going to loop through all of them on false, and then from the array element I'm going to set puzzle finished to be true, and this is going to set this variable true for all of our pillars. So make sure to compile and save this, go to the event graph, and now over here where we are activating our pillars, so right after we do so, we can now add a sequence which is going to do two tasks. So the second task is going to be the one that we already have created, does a delay, and then if the puzzle is not finished, then it deactivates the particle system. But the first task that we should do is check the other pillars. So let's make sure we run this function, and that's basically it. Now technically one good idea would be that before we actually run our interaction event, well, at the beginning of this interaction event, we should check whether the puzzle is finished, so that we wouldn't have to go through this bunch of code if the puzzle is already finished. So what I'm going to do is at the beginning of start interaction, I'm going to do an if branch check, and I'm going to check if the puzzle is finished. So we're going to get that, And then if the puzzle is not finished, so from false, then we are going to proceed with the code that we have. But if that is true, well, then we are simply not going to do anything. So that's basically it for now. I'm going to lower the delay to be something like 10 seconds, so it's easier for us to test. But now we need to actually connect our pillars in order for this whole thing to work, because as of right now, our pillars array is empty. So what I'm going to do is go to the viewport of the game. Now what you want to do is select one of your pillars, and now since we expose this on spawn, we have this pillars variable available to us. So add 4 entries, because well, we have 4 pillars. Depending on the amount of pillars, that's how many entries you need, and select all of your pillars. So let's select ourselves first. Well, the order doesn't matter, just simply make sure that you select all of them. And there we go. So then I'm going to right click this line right here, the 4 array elements, and I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to copy this into all of the other pillars, because all of them need to know all of these pillars. So now if we would try this out and pick up the lighter, well, let's light 2 of these up, and you will see that after 10 seconds both of these are gonna get extinguished. There we go. So they stop burning, but if we light all 4 of these, they should never stop. So let's wait 10 seconds and let's see. Well, this has probably been more than 10 seconds, so as you can see, all of them are still burning. So now what I want to do next is, whenever we are finished with this first part of the puzzle, I want something to come out of the ground that we can actually interact with again and do a different puzzle in order to open a different door.